Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs is called to order. It's Monday, March 21st, 2022. We are in conference room 325 and also via video conference. First bill today is House Bill 3085, Senate draft. Senate bill. Senate Bill 3085, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to the Hawaii Code of Military Justice. Vice Chair.
First up, we've got the Department of Defense in support. Okay, and that's the only testimony we have, so we will be moving on. Next bill up on the agenda is SB 2378 SD1 HD1 relating to the Taxation Board of Review. First up, we have the Department of Taxation in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. I always want to do this in front of you guys. Not you, but no. I'm Isaac Choi. I'm the Director of Taxation. We stand in strong support of this particular bill. As you know, being on the Board of Review is a very, very arduous task. The laws are getting more complicated. The issues are getting more complicated. And to have a volunteer board was very, very hard. And so we're behind in our inventory of getting cases through. I think it's time for a paid board. So we support this bill, and I'm standing by for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's actually all the testifiers we have today. Members, any questions?
I have a question.
Nakamura.
Director Cho, I've also looked forward to this opportunity.
Oh my gosh.
Revenge.
No, but my question is, you discussed the backlog. What is the backlog on appeals?
We have about 300 on appeals and about 300 in tax appeals court. As you know, the Board of Review is one of the appeals process in the tax process. And when you have a volunteer board, they have their own personal businesses too, in addition to trying to get everybody together. So it's yeah, we do have quite a backlog.
And do you think that you will find people to fill these full-time positions once you open it up?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm looking at the qualifications now for the board, and I think we can get tax practitioners. Unfortunately, it will be public service for most of the kind of experience that we want. But, you know, there's old people like me. So, yeah, I think we can handle that.
Thank you.
Report.
Thank you, Chair. Former representative, when you were put up for the appointment, all of us were very happy to know that you were going to be one of us who's now one of them, and you see both sides of it. However, this one is a bit of a tax increase, possibly. How much are you going to pay the salaried quote board?
Oh, it's in the bill. So the chair will get 85% of the director's pay, and I don't know how much the other two people will get. The entire board will cost, I think it's in the bill, $519,000 per year.
So 85% of the director's salary is how much?
172,000.
172,000?
That was my understanding. Yeah.
Well, I don't get paid 172,000, but
I was going to say, you're doing very well.
yeah.
Maybe with taxes
Uh,
and benefits.
But
Oh, maybe that's-
why does the voluntary board not work? Or weren't you at one point a volunteer on this board?
Okay, so there was a main point of contention last year, which I kind of solved, and that was the cooling off period for people who served on the board. People would have to serve on the board and have a 1-year cooling off period. So they're practitioners, right? They're practicing in their own practice. And then all of a sudden, when they roll off the board, they can't practice before the department for a year. Now, I forgot the guy's name, Gluck. Yeah, Mr. Gluck, I think, was the past ethics commissioner. I got him to at least acquiesce to conflicts in matters instead of a conflict with the entire agency. That helped a little bit. But again, the ethics code was a little bit of a hindrance on getting volunteers for the board.
But could we make an exception with these, with not having to have a timeout cooling off for 1 year?
Actually, Representative Ward, we've tried that since I was in the legislature. We tried to get that through to have that particular ethics requirements waived. We were unsuccessful.
Unsuccessful. So this is the only solution. What if you just gave them half of the amount of the salary that you're offering? Would you get any takers or I mean, at the salary, if it's 80, and I know you're doing very well, if it's that high, is there going to be a public service quote or is it going to be, I'm in it for the money?
You know, I think you have to realize in today's economic environment, the tax issues that we're now facing is very, very sophisticated, especially with multinational and international companies, especially in auditing companies that have no presence in Hawaii. I would not want to scrimp on the salaries or their competence level to serve on this particular board. I think they'll be worth every penny that we pay them.
Okay, Chair, last question. Is there a precedent in any other board or commission in the state of Hawaii or other places?
Absolutely. The labor board, both Damien's board and Marcus's board is a paid.
And they are paid equivalent to 85% of the
Yes.
director's salary,
Yes,
for sure.
yes.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope we
Dr. Ward.
don't see you too often.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Now we'll move on to SB 2043, relating to candidate committee and non-candidate committee organizational reports. I'll get a couple of testifiers here today. First up, Campaign Spending Commission in support. Over Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Gary Kam with the commission. We submitted a short written testimony in support of this bill, and I will stand on that testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Common Cause Hawaii in support.
Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We did not submit testimony on SB
Oh,
2043.
I'm sorry.
Thank
We
you.
only had Campaign Spending Commission. Members, any questions for Campaign Spending Commission? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SB 3164, ST1, HT1 relating to campaign finance. First up, we have Campaign Spending Commission in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We actually submitted comments on this bill. It's a very complex bill, this model legislation, and I believe we just need more time to discuss with the sponsors of this legislation, what kinds of disclosures they're trying to get. And then we can discuss how we can go about doing it, making amendments to the current campaign finance law, and therefore attempt to keep the language consistent with existing law rather than drop this model law just into Chapter 11. Other than that, I'll stand on our written comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Common Cause Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We do stand in support of this bill, SB 3164. We find that this bill will increase transparency in our campaign and in our electoral system, or in our campaign finance system in our electoral system. We agree with Campaign Spending Commission that this is a complex law, but we have proposed amendments to this bill that we have forwarded to the Campaign Spending Commission, and we are just waiting for a meeting to set up with Campaign Spending Commission to discuss our proposed changes to streamline this bill and to incorporate it into the existing framework of our campaign spending laws. And so we are more than willing to work with Campaign Finance Commission to bring more transparency and accountability for dark money that's being spent in our elections. I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you for hearing this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last up, we have Campaign Legal Center in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Aaron McKean, and I'm legal counsel with the Campaign Legal Center. And we're in support of SB 3164 because it would ensure that Hawaii voters have more information about the wealthy special interests who are trying to influence their vote. We'll stand on our written testimony. I just want to say thank you to the committee for considering this important bill.
Okay, thank you, members. Any questions? Rep Board.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Ma, please. Ms. Ma, in paragraph 4 of your testimony, you say, in sum, the focus of the bill is to bring transparency to money that is transferred from one group to another before it's spent on election ads. Thus, whenever someone contributes $10,000 or more to another who spends that amount or more on an independent campaign spending, that donor is considered a major contributor and such, et cetera, et cetera. Who's transferring $10,000 to another group? Give me some street language on what this is talking about.
So we're talking like for super PACs. So we are concerned with super PACs who are trying to influence our elections and people who are trying to hide the true source of where that money is
Can
coming
you
from.
name names in Hawaii? What's going on here?
So we don't have names to name for you, but I will give you an example. In the 2020 elections, there were on the ballot initiative for the Maui charter amendments, a lot of agricultural amendments on the ballot, and there was some large monies being spent in that election. We want to get to the true source of who is trying to influence our ballot initiatives in Hawaii, who is trying to influence our elections in Hawaii. In 2022, there's governor's race, there's lieutenant governor's race. Everyone sitting here in the state capitol is up for election. And so we want to make sure that whoever is trying to influence our elections, we know who they are, who is trying to play around in Hawaii politics.
Does this have contribution limits attached to it, or this is the super PACs are outside of any of the contribution limits?
So this is not a contribution limits. This is like if you spend a certain amount, then you have to disclose you have to provide notice that you are tracing back to the original source, and people can opt out of election advertising. I always call it playing in our elections.
Could you tell us which group transferred $10,000 to another group?
I don't have that right at my fingertips.
But we know that, I'm
because-
trying to look for empirical, whatever is going on out there. 'Cause this is a lot of moving parts in here.
That's because we don't have that trace back requirement at this time. We have a disclosure, but we don't have a trace back to the original source in our laws at this time.
But we're having a law here to prevent something from happening, but you don't have any examples of it happening.
That's because we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ward. Thank you for those questions. That was actually very informative discussion. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, let's move on to SB 3282, SD1, HD1 relating to government records. We've got one testifier here today, Dags in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Dr. Adam Jansen, and I am here representing DAGS. We stand on our testimony, and I wanted to add that we have a unique opportunity here to really try and save the state quite a bit of money. If you haven't been out to the Record Center in Mopunapuna, it can store up to 60,000 cubic feet of inactive records, things that we're legally required to keep, but rarely ever access. So if we fill that up, we could potentially save tens of thousands of square feet of office space that are clogged up right now with boxes of records in the corner. But the thing that's prohibiting those records from being transferred to the Record Center is the fact that the agencies don't have staff whose position descriptions say move boxes. And two, they don't have vehicles. And outsourcing this is winding up costing the state $7 to $15 per box to have somebody else move it. So the proposal we have before you is to provide staff for the Record Center so that they can much more efficiently and effectively manage inactive governmental records and ensure that they're destroyed as soon as we're legally required. So we're not just putting them in a corner and forgetting about them. As soon as they're eligible, out the door they go. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Report.
Would it be easier, rather than buy the box, to pay somebody to electronically record them and then store it in the cloud?
It would not.
What's
So-
the cost benefit analysis comparison?
So to give you the cost benefit analysis, there are approximately 2,000 pages per box. So to shift all of those boxes to the Record Center, instead to digitize them, we estimate at about $4 to $5 million. And keep in mind that a vast majority of retention schedules are under 6 years. They're fiscal records, they're procurement records. We keep them in case we get audited, in case there's questions. By the time we would digitize all of that, half the records would be eligible for destruction anyway. So the most cost-effective method is to put them in mass dense cold storage out at the record center, let them live out their retention, then delete them.
I'm convinced because you called you, what did you call
I
yourself?
am an avowed records nerd. There's
Okay.
no question about it.
You've convinced me.
Thank you.
All right, members, any other questions? If not, we'll move on to SB 3329, SD1, HD1 relating to public participation in government. First up, we've got the Commission to Promote Uniform State Laws in support.
Aloha.
Go ahead.
Aloha, I'm Elizabeth Kent, and I support this because I believe in robust public participation. I believe that that builds a strong community, and I'm a big fan of the First Amendment. So I urge you to support this uniform law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Malama Pupukea Waimea in support.
Yes, aloha, Vice Chair Mariyoshi, members of the committee. My name is Denise Antolini. My day job, which I love, is a professor of law at the William S. Richardson School of Law. But in my private capacity, I'm the volunteer president of a little nonprofit on the North Shore of Oahu. So we submitted testimony and support on behalf of that nonprofit. I wanted to make three quick points. One is Hawaii does have an anti-SLAPP law that was passed by this legislature. In fact, one of the authors, I hope, will testify in just a minute, in 2002. And that law was very well intentioned and was meant to apply very fully to protect citizens who participate in government from retribution from, for example, developers or others who don't like their public participation. That law has not been as protective as it was intended. My organization was at the, I guess, bitter end of that experience, having been sued for $13 million for claims that were proven meritless. So what does this proposal do? It would adopt a uniform law, you'll hear more about that in a minute, and put Hawaii among the forefront of states that are modernizing their protections for public expression. So we urge the committee to adopt this law. It's had strong support so far, and happy to answer any questions. Mahalo for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Uniform Law Commission in support.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lane Shetterly. I'm an attorney in private practice in Oregon. I'm a member of the Uniform Law Commission, also from Oregon, and have been a member since 2005. As an aside, I should say that I was also, between 1997 and 2004, a member of the Oregon House of Representatives, chaired the House Judiciary Committee, and was pleased to be the sponsor of Oregon's anti-SLAPP law. The Uniform Law Commission is an organization of the states representing all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. We look to draft laws for states to enact, and by enacting them, create a more uniform system of state law in areas where uniformity is important. We determined that uniformity was important in the area of anti-SLAPP legislation because states that either don't have anti-SLAPP laws or that have weak or narrow anti-SLAPP laws invite what we call litigation tourism. In this day of the internet and social media, it is easy for a plaintiff to find a state in which to file an anti-SLAPP suit that may have no relation to either the plaintiff or the defendant, but has a weak or non-existent anti-SLAPP protection. And so we are urging states to adopt the Uniform Act to create a more uniform system. This bill will increase protections for your own residents, as Professor Antolini said, by strengthening your current anti-SLAPP law. Otherwise, I commend you to my written testimony that we submitted over the weekend, and otherwise be happy to answer any questions you might have. But thanks for your consideration of the bill today. I do urge your support.
Good, thank you. Next up, Hawaii Association for Justice in support. Okay, not present. Last up, we've got an individual, Hermina Marita, in support.
Aloha, Vice Chair Matsuyoshi, and members of and Chair Nakashima and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill. Can you hear me? I'm not.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I submitted written testimony where I gave you the history and background for the purpose of this law. But I just wanted to emphasize that we have a 20-year history on this law, and the experience has been that the courts have narrowly interpreted the law where it affords little to no protection for citizens participating in government processes, which our democracy relies on. This bill is based on carefully considered model legislation and is a huge step in finally fulfilling the legislature's original intent when it passed Chapter 634F of the Hawaii Revised Statutes back in 2002. So I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Sure. This is 3329. Yeah, board.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Antonini, please.
Yes, aloha.
Professor, thank you for being so active, not only at the School of Law, but in the community. My first question is, why was the anti-SLAPP law so weak and flimsy and didn't work? What was missing in it from your legal perspective?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ripward. There is a provision in the law that says the protections extend only when the SLAPP is based solely on testimony. That's the wording, solely on testimony. And in our case, at least that's one I'm most aware of, the judge said, well, your activity wasn't based solely on testimony. We were challenging a permit, SMA permit, with those challenges happen all the time. So the court very narrowly focused on that solely on testimony provision. There is a provision in the current law which would be retained that says the courts are supposed to interpret the law to the fullest extent possible. So I'm not going to get into, the judge ruled as the judge ruled, but the point is that one provision really blocks the protection of the statute. And so under the uniform law, it's a much broader definition. The umbrella is much broader. But I also want to say that the way the uniform law works in terms of an expedited judicial review of SLAPP claims is very fair to all parties. It basically speeds up the court's review when you have these SLAPP claims. So that should benefit everyone involved.
Thank you for that. I'm trying to see how the anti-SLAPP law, are you familiar with HB 2125 that says if you interrupt a education worker, you can be fined $2,000 or put in jail for 1 year, and how these might be contradictory to each other?
I apologize. I'm not familiar with that. You had mentioned that the other day, and I just haven't had a chance to look into it. I claim no familiarity with it. I really am not familiar. Sorry.
Is there anyone else on the call that knows HB 2125, which is really a slap against parents and it's very specific, Professor, about people who testify? You've probably saw the Loudoun County difficulties with the Board of Education. What about the other professor? The former elected representative. He probably would know about Hawaii Law 2125. Okay, Chair, I rest.
Okay, yeah, I think we might be getting a little off topic on the different bill.
Yeah, but no, it's very specific, because if this goes through, those parents who are going to be fined $1,000 or $2,000 and put a year in jail, this should protect them. And therefore that law should not even be on the books. Interrupting an education worker. It's very, very specific and relevant. Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions, members? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to SB 2752. ST2 HD1 relating to abandoned wells. First up, we've got the Department of Taxation with comments. Okay, thank you. Next up, we have DLNR in support.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Kaleo Manuel, Deputy with the Water Commission. We stand on our written testimony in strong support and offer comments and some suggested amendments, and are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we've got another person from DLNR, Ryan Imata. Will he be testifying today?
Yeah, Ryan Imata, Groundwater Regulation Branch. And yeah, we stand by our written testimony in support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Yeah, Representative.
The DLNR Water.
Aloha.
Hi, which version do you support? Because if I'm reading the committee report correctly, the bill began by requiring sellers of real property to disclose the existence of wells on the property. The last committee changed it by removing the requirement that sellers of real property disclose the existence of wells on the property. So I'm confused about this, and maybe you can help enlighten me.
Sure, thank you, Representative. We support this bill. That disclosure section was part of the overall bill, but the intent of the bill is really to protect aquifer health. That was taken out by the last committee, so we're comfortable because the last committee made it clear that it's already something that's supposed to be disclosed anyway under current statute. So it didn't affect the intent of the bill itself.
I see. So the current version is the one you support. We don't need, just to clarify, we don't need that statement.
Correct. Yeah, we were in the last committee. I think the discussion was presented that by the real estate testimony that's already required.
Thank you. My other question then, why do we need 3 full-time equivalent positions for this?
So
why do we
right,
need 1 full-time equivalent position for this?
yeah, that's a great question. So right now we are currently the Water Commission has a small staff of 20 with statewide mandate. Our groundwater branch currently consists of 4 people. The number of abandoned wells that we have right now that we know about is about 1,600. That would give each person basically 800 wells to oversee if all of them came in for this abandonment, and that we really need to kind of get to an address. So we think it's a modest request considering the magnitude of wells that exist in the state.
And what would the time frame be to go through that many wells? And would these full-time equivalent jobs then be sunsetted or stick around?
Yeah, that's a great question too. This specific program provides an incentive to get these abandoned wells sealed to prevent any type of contamination to aquifer. While these are occurring, there's still about 30 to 40 new wells that come on board every year, every month, 30 to 40 applications we get a month. So it's over 300 to 400 new wells that are potentially approved annually that then would fall, some would eventually fall into being abandoned if they're not used. So it continues to grow. Our numbers of wells throughout the state continue to grow. And I don't think we would use these positions in addition to focusing on abandonment, shifting as resources are needed to help fill out our groundwater regulation branch's needs.
No, thanks. I'm just concerned about creating new positions in perpetuity for a job that sounds like it might have a sunset where the work would drop off some for this specific issue. That's all. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Rep Board.
Thank you, Chair. Same gentleman. Speaking of protecting the aquifer, one of the biggest dangers are the existing cesspool in the thousands. Does this cover that at all? That's a separate entity entirely, because that's where really a lot of endangerment is involved.
Thanks, Representative Ward. That's a different, and that is not regulated under the Water Commission, separate agency.
But is obviously, how would you say, you're much aware that that's really a big endangerment, more so than a well. A well implies that there's reasonably clean water. A cesspool says there's really no clean water in it. But okay, that's a different issue. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe just to add, Representative, when we permit wells and the location of those wells, coordinating them with the location or presence of cesspools or septic systems is very important because they can be conduits. Oftentimes wells that a lot of these abandoned wells were developed probably prior to the water code when we had well standards in place that ensures that the construction of those wells are done in a ways to prevent contamination. So those holes could still, even though they're wells today, could be conduits for contamination if they're not designed properly. And then if you add the potential wastewater or any type of surface water contaminants getting into that, it could be a disastrous event. So, you know, we're just trying to be proactive as possible. On a lot of these wells include some of the old sugar shafts that are huge, basically openings, like for example, Red Hill. it's a shaft style development where it's basically a huge conduit right into our aquifers. And we're just concerned and wanting to make sure we address those as soon as possible.
Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah, members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SB 2480 SD2 relating to the Wahiawa irrigation system. First up, we have ADC in support.
Can you repeat that again, please?
Agribusiness Development Corporation.
Oh,
in
yeah,
support.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. This is Jimmy Nakatani from Agribusiness Corporation. We stand on written testimony and strong support of this bill. We're open for any questions. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Next up, Department of Ag with comments. Good person.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Morris Saka for the Department of Ag. We will stand our testimonies in support of the intent of the measure and also expressing our strong concerns. Basically, this is to summarize our concerns, just that well, the concept of preserving this important water asset is important to the state. What the measure calls for as far as DLNR's part is concerned is just remediation and maintenance of the dam and spillway, but it doesn't provide for any funding for it, and the ongoing funding will be costly, and we're concerned about how that is going to be managed. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Brian Cow here too from Department of Ag. I'm assuming you're for both. Okay. All right, next up, DLNR with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair. Vice
Wait, I got this, Kurt. I got it.
Oh.
Live in person. Thank you, committee members. Suzanne Case from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We did provide some detailed comments, and we stand on our written testimony on those comments. We do want to acknowledge Wahiawa Dam is an important asset to the state. It was built over 100 years ago as a massive irrigation project for central Oahu, and obviously is still important for that. It also provides flood control and wastewater management and public recreation. And the department's responsibility in the area is primarily the dam safety regulation program through the engineering division's dam safety program. So we do regulate the dam from that standpoint. We also have a state park there that has a boat ramp in it, and our Division of Aquatic Resources manages a fishing area under cooperative agreement with the landowner since 1957. We did provide some comments in our testimony, suggestions for adding funding. The bill would need some due diligence funding for an acquisition. That's about 500,000 we're estimating. These are all very, very rough estimates. And we do have requested amounts in there for managing the park, the public recreation area, and also enforcement. There's a homeless population in some parts of the land adjacent to the reservoir. Thank you very much. And we do have staff available for questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip all of your staff for now. Dole Food Company in support.
Hello, I'm Dan Nellis, the General Manager for Dole Food Company Hawaii, and we're in strong support. We'd like to, I did submit written testimony and we're ready to stand on that testimony. I just want to remind all the chairman, vice chairman in your committee that this is a very important asset for agriculture in North and Central Oahu, but also for the things that Ms. Case just described: flood control, wastewater control, possible hydroelectricity, recreation for the fishing and boating. So it's a real important asset. It's an asset that Dole will not be able to handle coming up with this upgrade for dam safety that is necessary. And so therefore we're offering to sell and or gift it to the state of Hawaii in a negotiated program. There is also a co-owner for part of the land under the water and along the edge and the spillway. And that's addressed in section 4 of the amended bill. And I'd like to just say that Dole requests for an amendment to section 4 to include all TMKs under the lease agreement between Dole and Sustainable Hawaii, who is the other owner. These parcels are necessary to fully operate the Wahiawa irrigation system. So a short version is Dole leases the part that they don't own. And the state needs to end up owning all of that to be able to manage the system properly. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Ulupono Initiative in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Matayoshi, Chair Nakashima, members of the committee, Mike Tata on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative. We'd like to stand on our testimony in strong support of this measure and just reiterate some of the comments made before about the importance of water to our local producers. Just making that connection towards how climate change is really affecting our ability to produce agricultural products here within the state. It's going to be important to maintain this very, very critical resource over the course of time if we're looking to make some type of resilient impact on climate change. So really hoping to continue this conversation and really find a way to keep this system within the state's purview to really support local producers, especially in that area. Thank you very much, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Last up, we've got Hawaii Farm Bureau in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, and members of the committee. I'm Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written testimony, which is in support. I think you heard from the previous testifier, Chair Case, Dole, Ulupono, that this is an important agricultural asset. Water is critical. Without water, no agriculture. Our concern with this particular irrigation system is if it is sold to someone else or even decommissioned, what's going to happen to those farmers in Wailua and Haleiwa? How are they going to get their water? How are they going to farm? So we do urge the committee to support this measure. Again, we need water. We have a goal of doubling food production. We have other agricultural goals. They all take water. So we need access to affordable water. We believe that if the state takes over this system, those two can be accomplished and we can continue to grow our agriculture industry. So thank you for this opportunity to testify and please support this measure.
Okay, thank you, members. Any questions?
For Department of Agriculture, please. Hi, thank you for being here, Mr. Asta. I wanted to ask you, in your mind, who is going to be operating and maintaining the entire system? Will it be a different state agencies doing different parts of it, or is there one entity that's overseeing it all?
That's a question that we've had ourselves, because this is a very complex system. It not only includes, the lake, Lake Wilson itself. It actually, a key component obviously is the dam and the spillway structure. But connected to this water system is a pretty extensive irrigation system that delivers water to different farmers and different users in different areas. We understand the reason why ADC was named originally as a kind of a key component was because ADC does have agricultural operations that utilizes at least a portion of that irrigation system, I believe, below the dam area. But this system, if you were to track out historically how the system operated, extends all the way out to Mokuleia, to the North Shore. So we're not certain what portion of the system is being contemplated as being acquired by this bill. So that's an issue that we had that we were talking about. And even then, from what we understand how the bill works right now is that DOA will mitigate and repair and maintain the dam and spillway structure, assuming we acquire all of the land and the assets, through this bill. But we assume that the actual irrigation systems, at least a portion of it was going to be carried out by ADC, at least as to the areas that it is being served. We're not clear about how the rest of the system is going to be managed and operated. So that is a question, a very valid question to be asked, because we're not sure ourselves.
Would it be helpful to have, to look into this further, to clarify that as part of this bill here?
Definitely. I mean, a greater clarity in understanding what we're acquiring, first of all, in terms of what parts of the system. And my understanding is that there may be other privately owned portions of the system that could be involved. We're not sure. So exactly what is contemplated by this acquisition is not completely clear to us. And conceptually, we understand, what we're trying to move forward with, but the details we're not clear on.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Report.
Mr. Nellis, please, Dole. Mr. Nellis, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Mr. Nellis? Yes, I can hear
go
you.
ahead. Yes.
Were you guys the progenitors of this deal, or were we? Well, give us a bit of the background.
Well, background is we've been working with the state for a few years to try to get this to move forward. And we did not write the bill, but we offered the deal. And it's in the written testimony that we set a sale price based on what the estimated cost of upgrading the dam spillway to the new modern standard that is required by DLNR Dam Safety Division. But we, right from the beginning, said that we would be more than pleased to negotiate a gift of the system if the state of Hawaii will accept the upgrade costs on their behalf. This makes a lot of sense because the state of Hawaii can access federal infrastructure funding for dams and reservoirs that a private landowner cannot. And the fact that if we were going to rebuild this ourselves at a cost of $20 million, there's very likely that Dole Food Company Hawaii, the small pineapple farm that we are in Hawaii, would not exist any longer. So to save this asset, it really becomes the onus is on the state of Hawaii to save this asset. And the state of Hawaii benefits currently by the recreational use of Lake Wilson, by the city and county discharge into the lake for effluent from the Wahiawa wastewater treatment, and obviously by the agriculture economy that is supported by the irrigation system. There's also the talk of trying to develop hydroelectric. A independent company has talked about trying to buy the system from us so they can do hydroelectric. But also the state of Hawaii has talked about that in some of their presentations. This is a win for the people of Oahu and for the state of Hawaii if we preserve this asset and we keep 500 people working in agriculture, 200 of which are right on our farm, and another 300 more out in north central Oahu, and many more ag jobs in the future as the lands that have been purchased by ADC become productive with new farmers in the future. So this system is really, really big enough to handle a lot more farms, but Dole cannot do this. We need to look to the state of Hawaii to step up and do this.
Interestingly, you mentioned the gifting in your testimony, but I see the bill says $21 million, but what you've just said, you prefer obviously the gifting rather than the $21 million.
Well, yes, I would prefer that. But again, if we sold it for 21 million, then we are going to have to spend that 21 million to upgrade the system.
Exactly.
But absolutely, I would prefer to gift it. The state will not really have to spend $21 million of state money. They will be able to access federal money. Further to that, they will be able to do it to a design criteria that they have established, and there will be less debate over which engineering company should be suitable to do the job. So that's where we're at with that.
Has the gifting been on the table, or that's just a more recent phenomenon?
No,
Or
sir,
how
it's
long
been
has it
on,
been?
it's been
How
on the
long?
table.
How long has it been on the table?
Since we started talking about this maybe 3 years ago. And prior
Oh,
to that, there was many years ago an opportunity to gift it, but Coloco Dam broke and the state of Hawaii got very scared and said, no, we're not accepting anything. So, and when I say gift, it's in the written testimony that we do expect to get irrigation water to Dole at no cost at a amount that is drawn out in the document. So it's a barter, it's a trade, but it's primarily a gift.
Since gifting is not in the bill, should we vote for the bill to pay you $21 million, given what you just said?
Well, I would remind you to look at the bottom of the bill where it says it authorizes the office of the governor to negotiate with Dole Hawaii. And that's where the gifting part comes in.
Oh, okay. That's where the unwritten words are the most important. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, it's written, but it is at the end of the bill, and yes, it's
Pretty
it
subtle.
slips by. Yeah, it's subtle. It's subtle.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Representative.
Oh, Chair. Oh, someone else.
I just have a question for Suzanne.
Go ahead,
I have a question for Suzanne Case. It sounds like that due to the state's new rules on reservoirs and the responsibilities of private landlords to maintain their reservoirs, they do not have access to funds to repair. I have a reservoir or several in my district that could benefit from the state purchasing the reservoir and doing all the things that are in this bill. I'm just wondering, is that the policy we want to pursue statewide? Is the purchasing of private reservoirs and spillways?
I mean, to the policy statewide is, I guess, for you all to decide what the best approach is. And you know, maybe federal funding can help, but I know from the state side, you know, we do regulate the dam. So we have, from our side, we have to be hands off on the dam management. And so I don't know, you know, it'd have to have some other public benefit, you know, not, you know, what's the public benefit of the state owning a dam that is in private ownership? That's really the question, I guess. These dams are, you know, they're old earthen dams constructed, you know, again, a lot of them are 100 years ago. And were mainly for parts of irrigation systems for cane and pineapple that for the most part don't exist anymore. In some locations they do exist. They do some flood control by restricting floodwaters when they come down, place to fill up. But because they're old earthen dams, they, you know, if it overtops, if it doesn't have the capacity and overtops, it can erode the dam, and then you get the risk of a catastrophic flood, like happened at Coloco. And so, you know, we are trying to, you know, we are, the dam safety program is pushing hard on dam owners to bring them into compliance. Almost all of them are out of compliance. It's a very high risk. And so some of them have chosen to take the dams out of commission by breaching the spillway and having the water go straight through. that prevents the danger of a catastrophic break in a storm, which would inundate the lower area, but it doesn't provide the other benefits of the dam, including flood control up until that point.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair Nakashima.
Morris.
Okay, thank you for being here. Prior to the meeting, I received a proposed House draft from Representative Peruso that listed a number of additional properties that she wanted to purchase amounting to about 146 acres. Are you familiar with this list?
Not, I know, I'm aware that there's been discussions about, what acreage is covered, and there was discussions about the specific land area covered by the Sustainable Hawaii interest, under which the dam or parts of the dam and the spillway itself is situated. So I'm aware that there's been discussions going on about that. And I understand that the revised version included a possible $5 million for the acquisition of those additional land interests. As far as I'm aware, that the targeted acquisition of that particular provision was that parcel that has the spillway and the dam in it. And again, there was, to my knowledge, there was no discussion about the irrigation system itself that I had previously mentioned, which is the reason why we're still trying to figure out exactly what is covered by this bill.
Okay. So, well, then might I forward this list to you folks and then maybe get back to us with any comments that you may have or to the next committee.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely. I would really appreciate that because it would bring some clarity, at least to us, in terms of what is actually covered by the bill.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other members have questions that haven't asked one yet? Otherwise, we'll go back to rep board.
Thank you, Chair. Either Department of Agriculture or Deal and R. I want to ask about the hydroelectric potential that was mentioned by Mr. Nellis. Have you guys vetted that? It's refreshing to hear that there is that potential. And on Oahu, I have not heard it other than today. Have you guys vetted or looked at it as a hydro?
Not to my knowledge. We understand that there's been prior discussions. I don't believe that we were involved, but it was some of the potential uses that I've heard discussed as a possibility.
Okay, thank you. Chair, can I go back to Mr. Nellis? I see he's still on the camera there. Mr. Nellis, you're still there?
Yes, sir.
Was that just a thought or was that something that's got some viability when you mentioned the hydroelectric from some company who was thinking of doing that? Is that serious or that was
well, we have
throwaway?
Pardon me. We had two companies that had asked about maybe buying this system so they could do hydroelectric. We also had discussions with Senator Dela Cruz's office where he had a mock-up of what a stored hydroelectric system would look like, and he had been, I'm not sure which consultant he had gotten that mock-up from, but so it's not a pipe dream. It's a very realistic thing. It's just a very expensive project, and somebody would have to have their contracts ready with Hawaiian Electric and so on. But in a state that is demanding that we are sustainable energy, hydroelectricity makes perfect sense. So yes, it's a possibility.
And they did a feasibility study, or again, they just looked at it and say, well, yeah, the water going downhill, it probably is going to work. Did they do a full-on feasibility study?
I do not have their feasibility study. The people that we talked to, the two different groups, made us sign non-disclosure agreements, and then they did their own work. We did bring some of their engineers out to the dam so they could do some preliminary work. I don't know that they've got a feasibility study completed. I can't say that they do.
And if it was, you guys could do it and make money on it rather than giving it away.
Well, that,
Half a joke, actually.
yeah, that's half a laugh on the answer. So, but I do want to go back to the previous concerns about Representative Peruso submitting other parcel numbers. This is why Dole is requesting an amendment that includes all the parcels that are in the lease agreement between Dole and Sustainable Hawaii. They are integral to the system and they should be included in the authorization. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? If not, I've got one for Department of Ag. And Morris, you mentioned the ongoing maintenance costs for the dam, which are concerning, but we've heard throughout the testimony various ideas for monetization of the dam, including hydroelectric and perhaps, I don't know, water sales, recreation, things like that. Is it possible that those income sources could offset fully or at least partially, the maintenance of the dam itself?
Depending on how it's structured, yes. I mean, it definitely could. But one of the other concerns about the lack of operating expenses was the way it's the acquisition is currently structured. When DOA assumes responsibility for the dam, the spillway, it doesn't have any revenue source. Ordinarily, the revenue source is generated through the irrigation systems that delivers the water to users. And with DOA just taking on the responsibility of fixing the structure and maintaining it, there really is no income revenue stream. Depending on how a hydropower facility is put there, if that income stream could be at least partially used to recoup some of that cost, that would be wonderful. It's just that we haven't seen any specific, conceptual plans or designs, so we don't know where it's going to be located. We assume that it would be, if it's a hydropower source, that it would be associated with the dam structure and all that. But that's all hypothetical. We have no information on it, so we really can't project anything from it. But your idea really makes sense, because one of our big concerns was going forward, if we don't have a revenue source, we need to build it into our ongoing operational budget on an annual level, and basically be subsidized by the state for operating the dam and spillway.
And it does sound like these plans are not in their nascent stages. I mean, maybe it'd behoove you to go find out. I mean, I know this deal is still being worked out, but might want to at least get the numbers from the people who have been proposing it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to SB 204 relating to aquatic resources. First up, we have DLNR in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Nielsen, Administrator for Division of Aquatic Resources, representing the department on this measure. We stand on our written testimony in support and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the testifiers we have today. Members, any questions? Report.
Aquatic resources. Could you explain this in street language, what aquatic banks are in lieu of something? I'm trying to get a handle on it. It just doesn't make sense yet.
Yeah, thank you, Rep. Ward. That's a great question. So this is a model that it's used a lot with like wetland mitigation. So for example, a shopping mall wants to fill in a wetland to build a shopping mall. They buy credits from a mitigation bank to restore those wetland credits somewhere else so they can put up the shopping mall. It's essentially the same thing with coral reefs. So you need to develop a harbor. You're going to lose some corals by developing that harbor. So you do some coral restoration, some coral mitigation somewhere else to make up for that loss. So it's very similar in that regard.
So we could put new coral in Hana Bay versus where are they building harbors anymore, or actually taking coral up? I thought that was pretty much history.
Yeah, thank you. The most recent example is the Kapalama Harbor expansion in Honolulu Harbor. And so there's some corals that will have to be lost to be able to make those infrastructure upgrades. And so DOT, is working with us to make up for that loss by doing some restoration just right outside of the Honolulu Channel on the reef. So that's the most recent example.
So if you have any extra ones, put it in Hanauma Bay, please. Thank you.
That's a great idea.
Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to SB 570, SD1, HD1 relating to historic preservation. First up, we have DLNR in opposition.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alan Downer. I'm the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division. Department stands on its written testimony, opposing in part and supporting in part. And I'd just like to take a moment to clarify the opposition. What we oppose in this is the change in the age criterion to 100 years. Particularly since that's going to relate primarily to archaeological sites, the nature of archaeological data makes it extremely difficult to specify clearly whether something is 100 years old or 101 or 99. And, we view that 100 years as a bright line distinction. So if it's 99, it doesn't qualify. And so I also think that there's a tremendous problem with having some resources protected when they're 100 years old, some others when they're protected at 50 years. So we urge you to take that into account. I'd also point out that, part of that 100-year language is intended to, at least in theory, to protect places of particular concern to Native Hawaiians. And while I hear that concern, I believe the existing criteria for the Hawaii Register adequately deals with that. Just within the last 6 months, the Hawaii Historic Preservation Review Board, which controls the Hawaii Register, listed Pu'ukapale, and that listing was entirely because it is of traditional cultural significance, had nothing to do with any of the archaeological sites or historic resources that are located there. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have another individual here to testify in opposition, Lorraine Minatoishi. Should be over Zoom.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Chair Representative Mark Nakashima and Vice Chair Representative Scott Matayoshi and the members of the committee for hearing my testimony. I'd like to stand on my written testimony in strong opposition to this measure. I believe, first of all, that the 100-year cutoff is quite long. It's a little too long. And as far as the 50 years and the section that talks about meeting the criteria for being entered into the Hawaii Register of Historic Places is I think a little bit too narrow. There are many, I spoke with somebody involved in the original writing of the rules, and he was explaining to me that the reason why he put the beginning was that we're independently deciding on properties, saying that, well, it's over 50, but it's not on the register. We're deciding that it's not a historic property without going through the process of making that determination. So I'll give you an example. There's the Hana bridges on Maui. Well, back in the late 1990s, nobody thought that was historic at all. Federal government could have easily come in, knocked all those bridges down, rebuilt it like they were planning on doing. But because of this particular law that says if it's over 50 years old, you need to go through the steps. So it's not like we're saying all buildings are historic. you go through the rules, you make the determination, you get the State Historic Preservation Office to agree to that, to concur to that, and then you can either move forward with your project as though it is not a historic property, or if the determination is, okay, it's historic, then you need to follow 6E-8 or 6E-42. So there is a screening process. It's not like every single property is going to be automatically historic, but what I'm saying is let this Historic Preservation Office people help make that determination.
Thank you. And just
Thank
a reminder to all our testifiers, there is a 2-minute limit on testimony.
So
That's
sorry.
the last testifier. Oh, no, you were good. That's the last testifier. Members, any questions on this bill? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 573 SD1 relating to wildlife. First up, DLNR in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Afshin Siddiqui. I'm representing DLNR today. We stand in our testimony in support of this measure and are available for questions.
Okay, thank you. That's actually the only testifier we have, although we have about 20 plus individuals writing in for testimony in support as well. Members, any questions for DLNR? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 1411 SD2 relating to historic preservation. First up, we have OHA in support.
Aloha, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kamakana Pereira. I'm the lead compliance specialist with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We stand on a written testimony in support of what's proposed in this measure, and we're available for any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Ellen Downer from DLNR in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alan Downer. I'm the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division. The department stands on its written testimony and support. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have DLNR's Hawaii State Ahamoku in support.
Thank you, Chair. Leimana Tamate, with the Hawaii State Ahamoku. You have our written testimony in the front of you. We stand on our testimony of support. Although our people did have a couple of concerns, which I outlined it as comments in the testimony. And that was only in the publication of where burial sites are going to be. Thank you. I'll stand by for questions if needed.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 2764 ST2 HD1 relating to special management areas. First up, we have the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development in support.
Aloha, Chair Nakatani, Vice Chair Matayoshi. This is Justine Nihipali for the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. You have our written testimony and we'll stand on that in support. Thank you.
Okay, next up, DLNR in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Michael Kane, on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, we stand on our testimony in support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have DOT in support.
Vice Chair Matayoshi and members of the committee, the DOT is in support of the measure and we will stand on our written testimony. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have the County of Maui Department of Planning in support in person, but I don't see that person. Okay, not here. Next up, we have the Hawaii State Association of Counties in support.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Hawaii State Association of Counties. We support this measure. We have a requested amendment on page 3, paragraph 1 to read construction of a single family residence that is less than 5,000 square feet of floor area, or reconstruction of a single family residence that is less than 7,500 square feet of floor area.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 2070 SD1 relating to special purpose revenue bonds to assist the Hawaiian Legacy Reforestation Initiative to restore Hawaii's forests and natural resources. First up, we have the Hawaiian Legacy Reforestation Initiative in support.
Hi, hello, mahalo Chair Nakashima and Vice Chair Matayoshi and other members of the committee for having us. Thank you for the opportunity to support the testimony and to be here with you. My name is Jason Hopai, representing Hawaiian Legacy Reforestation in support of this bill, and we stand behind our written testimony and will be available for additional questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Members, that's all the testifiers we have today, although we do have a number of individuals writing in support, about 10 of them. Any questions? Okay.
I have a
Oh, yes,
question.
go ahead.
Yes.
Rep. Nakamura.
Yeah, I have a question. There was testimony from 360, and this is for the Hawaiian Legacy Reforestation Initiative. There was a letter of opposition saying that this type of program that uses carbon credit sequestering is, at the end of the day, not good for the environment. And I just wanted to get your take on that, and because I know I have personal experience with you planting trees throughout the state, and so wanted to get your take on that opposition.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak up regarding the opposition. I believe the individual it maybe doesn't have a lot of experience with offset programs and the benefit that it has to the community and the environment. But our primary practice is planting trees, and we know planting trees has a significant impact to the community and the society overall. I believe the individual is speaking specifically perhaps about the market without a total understanding about what our operations does and our participation here in Hawaii.
And do you qualify and meet all the criteria of a special purpose revenue bond allocation?
Yes, ma'am. To our understanding, we do.
And under what category do you qualify?
Did you hear the question?
No. Was there another question?
Do you know what category? Is this under economic development or manufacture? I mean, there are different categories to qualify as a SPURB. I just wasn't clear what category you qualify under to be considered for a SPURB.
I believe that we qualify under both economic development as we create industry and jobs, and we'd also qualify going under agriculture and promotion of additional agriculture industry here.
Thank you.
Okay, members,
Thank you.
any other questions from the board?
Could I do a follow-up with it? What's the size of the SPURB that you're acting? It's actually blank on the bill. What's the estimated amount? Do you want me to repeat it?
Dollars?
Yeah, dollar amounts of the
Unable to hear
SPURB.
you, sir.
Yeah, the bill is blank, and I wondered if you have a dollar amount that you're going to ask for the SPURB. Are you still, you didn't get that one either?
I don't think he heard.
Oh, you're frozen,
He's frozen.
or my voice is frozen.
Very still. Pretend
He's very Madame Tussauds.
Oh, wait,
Oh,
oh.
he's moving.
Oh, there he's moving. He's alive.
Did you hear the question? Or maybe Rep. Ward could repeat it.
The amount of the SPURB, please, a dollar amount. He's just smiling away.
What a frame to be frozen on. Maybe you could try turning off your video. That sometimes helps. Can we turn off this video?
Give him some more bandwidth.
Yeah. Does that help? Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. You have a SPURB amount, a dollar amount.
I apologize. The SPURB amount was 50 million in its original writing.
50 or 15?
A 50.
5-0. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, members, any other questions?
I have a question.
Chair.
In the SPURB filing, I think there was a question posed by our research department regarding whether you are a domestic nonprofit corporation or a limited liability partnership.
We are a nonprofit organization here in the state of Hawaii.
Okay, thank you.
Any follow-up, Chair?
No, that's it.
Members, any other questions?
Can I follow that up? Is that state of Hawaii or the federal IRS designation? There's two of them, actually.
501c3, excuse me.
Operating kosher by the feds. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, let's move on to SB 2679 SD2 HD1 relating to driver's license. We've got two testifiers today. First up, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Vice Chair Matayoshi, Chair Nakashima, members of the committee, the DOT is in support of the measure and will stand on our testimony. Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, we have AARP in support.
Good afternoon. I'm Audrey Suga Nakagawa from AARP, and we stand our testimony in support. We appreciate having this extension of our renewal period from 2 to 4 years for our older drivers. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. And members, we have about 10 individuals testifying in support, but only through written testimony. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 3077 SD1 HD1 relating to the Barbering and Cosmetology Licensing Act. We've got one testifier today in support, the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology.
Good afternoon, Chair Nakashima, Vice Chair Matayoshi, and members of the committee. My name is Jenny Yam, Executive Officer of the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology. Thank you for hearing the department's administration bill. The board will stand on its written testimony in strong support. This bill will repeal chapters 438 and 439 and also create a brand new chapter to align the regulatory structures, correct the inconsistencies found in our existing chapters, and address evolving industry concerns and need. I just want to note that in my testimony, I provided information for the committee. Barber schools are licensed by the State Department of Education. Section blank -3B also allows the practice of barbering and practice of cosmetology to be carried outside of a barber shop or beauty shop under specified conditions. So for these reasons, the board respectfully requests the committee to consider several amendments to this measure as noted in the written testimony. So specifically on page 2, lines 8 to 9, the definition for barber school means a licensed school engaged in teaching the practice of barbering. On page 17, lines 18 to 21 and page 18, lines 1 to 2, section blank -12, it should read the license of a barber, beauty operator, beauty instructor, barber shop, beauty shop, or beauty school, and the permit of a barber apprentice, beauty apprentice, or temporary permittee shall be conspicuously displayed in the place of business or employment. And the third amendment is on page 19, lines 13 to 19, failure of a barber, beauty operator, beauty instructor, barber shop, beauty school, barber apprentice, beauty apprentice, or temporary permittee engaged in the practice of barbering or practice of cosmetology to display a license or permit in a conspicuous place in the office, place of business, or employment or school during all hours of operations. I'll be available for any questions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, let's move on to SB 879 SD1 HD1 relating to counties. We've got one testifier, DHHL, in support.
Aloha mai kako, Tyler Kepagones, Deputy Chairman for the Department of Homeland, standing on our written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 2251 SD2 HD1 relating to the Public Housing Authority. First up, we have the AG's office with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair.
members of the committee, Deputy Attorney General Jennifer Sugita. The Attorney General's office has comments on the bill. It is set forth in our written testimony. I am available for any questions you may have on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Hawaii Public Housing Authority in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chairs, members of the committee. The Hawaii Public Housing Authority stand in support of this measure, requesting a couple amendments as outlined in last page of our testimony. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to SB 3324 SD2 HD1 relating to infrastructure maintenance and housing subdivisions. Members, we have one written testimony with comments by Department of Budget and Finance, but they're not here today. So we'll move on to SB 2583 SD2 related to public lands. Again, one testifier here who should be here today, Department of Business and Economic Development and Tourism in support. Denise, are you online? I'm sorry, HHFDC, yeah. Oh, I wonder why they put this here. That's weird. HHFDC.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee.
Oh, gotcha.
Denise Matsubar for HHFDC. We stand on our written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's recess for decision making.
Okay, Committee on Labor, oh, I'm sorry. Committee on Judiciary and Homeland Affairs is called back to order at a winter flashback. Okay. Reconvening for decision-making on the March 21st agenda. First up, Senate Bill 3085, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1 related to the Hawaii Code of Military Justice. Chair would like to move this along, further defecting the date to January 1st, 2022. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 3085 SC2 HD1 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Rep. Ichiyama.
Aye.
Rep. Kobayashi.
Aye.
Rep. Lopresti.
Aye.
Rep. Lowen.
Aye.
Rep. McKelvey.
Aye.
Rep. Nakamura.
Aye.
Rep. Takumi.
Aye.
Rep. Tokioka. Excuse. Rep. Ward.
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 2387, 78, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1 relates to Taxation Board of Review. Chair's recommendation is to make a technical change on page 2, line 3, from accounting to accountant, and blank the salaries on the bill. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2378 SD1 HD1 with amendments noted previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Senate Bill 2043 relating to candidate committees and non-candidate committee organizational reports. Chair's recommendations to we pass this out with technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2043 with amendments noting the previous excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 3146, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to campaign finance. There's been some discussion about this, and the campaign spending recommended that we defer this, so I will defer this matter for the future legislature. Senate Bill 3182, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to government records. 3282. Yeah, 3282. Relate to government records. The chair would like to amend the measure to limit the controller's authority over records to those existing after August 21st, 1959, so statehood. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair is amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 3282 SD1 HD1 with amendments noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 3329, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to public participation in government. Chair's recommendation is to we pass this out with technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or comments?
Sure.
Representative Ward.
Yeah, I think this is a good bill, but I think it directly contradicts H1 2125, which is a shutdown, a slapback of parents vis-a-vis the DOE, a year in jail and $2,000. That is something that needs to be known by the public.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 3329 SD1 HD1 with amendments noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 2750 52, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to abandoned wells. Chair's recommendation is to accept the amendments proposed by Reuters regarding knowing about or visible from a accessible place on page 7, line 17 to 21 to input the Reuters recommendation there. And then to require the Directive Taxation to adopt rules at page 4, line 1 and 2. Members, any questions or comments?
Chair.
Representative Lubrski.
Thank you, Chair. I like those changes, but I'm going to be reservation on a different issue, and that has to do with the 3 full-time equivalent jobs. Creating these open-ended positions concerns me because it seems like there's an initial large amount of work to do, but over time it'll drop off, and I'm just worried about creating government bloat and having more FTEs than are needed in the long term. Thank you. So WR for now.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2752 SC2 HD1 with amendments noting the previously excused members and the reservations of Representative Lopresti. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. On Senate Bill 2480, Senate Draft 2, related to the Wahiawa irrigation system. Technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style, and also including in the committee report additional properties for consideration by the legislature. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Ward.
Comment in that I think it's invaluable. This hearing revealed that they would rather gift it rather than sell it. I think that would be helpful for ongoing committees to know that that is a preference, buying rather than buying it, just gift it as is where it is. And that it might, I'm not sure how much, but if it does have hydroelectric power and we're going to go off the fossil fuel, I think that's an important fact that we either know or at least put in the committee report, a gifting is preferable by dole. Thank you.
Okay, Chair will include those comments in the committee report. Members, any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Chair. I think there will be hundreds of landlords who would gift reservoirs that are in disrepair and not complying with current reservoir rules and regulations. So based on the testimony of Department of Agriculture, I will be with reservations.
Okay.
I would just like to note that this is a major commitment of state resources, which I think is valuable because of the number of jobs that are of agricultural jobs that can benefit and the need to increase our food self-sufficiency. But I feel that taking on this responsibility, giving this the funding to Department of Ag, who is questioning what is the bigger picture expenses for the entire system and what is it going to cost to maintain this system in the long run, are critical questions that should be part of an overall plan for this, for the Wahiawa irrigation system. So I feel like a business plan or feasibility study should also be a part of this overall bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative McKelvey.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to echo my colleagues' concerns with the measure. She hit the nail on the head, but I haven't seen the committee report. I don't know if it's going to be specifically alluding to the properties that were mentioned by our other colleague from Wahiawa, but there are a lot of other dams in Maui in particular. They're being decommissioned that could benefit from this, as well as the Big Island and other neighbor islands. And I know federal infrastructure funds were brought up numerous times, but I've not seen or heard of that conversation happening. And I think a programmatic approach of using federal funds so all the islands can benefit by being able to have this kind of acquisition for our dams would be most helpful. So given all of this, I'll be going with reservations for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is pass SB 2480 ST2 with amendments noted the previously excused members and the reservations of Reps Nakamura and McKelvey and any other members voting with reservations. Rep. LaPresti, reservations. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 204, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, and relate to aquatic resources. Chair's recommendation is to move this as is. Members, questions, comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 204 SD1 HD1 as is, noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 570, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relate to historic preservation. Chair's recommendation, we defer this matter.
Thank you.
SB 573, Senate Draft 1, related to wildlife. Chair's recommendation is to move this as is. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, unamended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 573 ST1 as is, noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 1411, Senate Draft 2, related to historic preservation. Members, on page 5, line 22, we're going to change pre-contact sites and monuments to pre-contact historic property. And on page 5, line 19, 10 should be changed to 7 to match the current statutory language. That's it. Members, any questions or comments? Representative LaPresti.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go reservations on this largely so I can have me and my staff watch it. My concerns really stem from the Hawaii Society for Archaeology's opposition to this earlier on, an earlier version. I want to make sure that whatever final version comes out with this respects the points that they were making about setting standards so high that they couldn't even be upheld in a court of law regarding dating of historical and archaeological sites. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 1411 SD2 with amendments noted the previously excused member and the reservations of Rep. LaPresti. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? The recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 2764, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to special management areas. Chair's recommendations, we adopt the 8 SAC amendments from Maui County and other technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or comments? Representative McKelvey.
Lou McKelvey. Chair, thank you so much for adopting those amendments. I greatly appreciate it. I think this will help address the issues I was discussing with you earlier, particularly what's going on in West Maui. So mahalo again for that.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2764 ST2 HD1 with amendments noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 2070, Senate Draft 1, create the special purpose revenue bonds to assist the Hawaiian Legacy Reforestation Initiative and restore Hawaii's forests and other natural resources. Chair's recommendation is that we move this unamended. Members, any questions or comments?
Chair, comment.
Ward.
Chair, I was so excited. I was really, before this bill, before I found out what they were looking at, they want $50 billion. You know, they have a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement to be able to borrow and leverage and pay back $50 million. You have to have really a robust organization. This group has been around, at least from what I just heard, 11 years. I'm just wondering if we're getting them a little bit over their head, or does anyone know anything in more detail than what this bill has said and what very little stuff we've got from the testimony. Otherwise, I'd say we would be doing them a disservice if we got them underwater. $50 million is a lot of money to borrow for a small nonprofit.
Well, that's the ceiling on this, and Budget and Finance will further vet them to make sure that they are not over their head.
Okay, well, we can trust them, hopefully. But do we ever get any feedback from them until the last minute, or is it where we pass it through and
Well,
then they get it?
it passes through, and then during the preceding year, Budget and Finance will work with the nonprofit to see if they qualify.
I trust BNF, but my instincts say that this is a really overreach, and I'm going to be with reservations.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Nakamura.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm also going to vote with reservations for a different reason, mainly because we have another bill moving through this session that takes this private activity bond ceiling cap and directs it all toward housing, because these funds actually can leverage federal low-income housing tax credits. And so wanted to address the concern raised by BNF that this would also be in conflict with that. But I do support the mission of this organization.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, Representative Joe.
Just same request, Chair.
Okay, reservations. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as is, yeah.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2070 SD1 as is, noting the previously excused member and the reservations of Representatives Ward, Nakamura, and McKelvey. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 2679, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to driver's licenses. Chair's recommendation is to move this as is. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2679 SD2 HD1 as is, noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 3077, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to the Barbering and Cosmetology Licensing Act. Chair's recommendation is we adopt the recommended amendments from the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology on page 2 regarding barber schools, on page 17 regarding the display of the permits, and on page 17 regarding the failure to display said permits. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 3077 SD1 HD1 with amendments noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 879, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, related to counties. On page 2, line 19, the words "or adjacent" should be inserted after the word "connect." And that is all. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 879 SD1 HD1 with amendments noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 2251, Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, related to the Public Housing Authority. I'd like to adopt the AG's amendments and also other technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Ward.
Chair, given the failed land dealings with the Hawaiian community and OHA being against this, they're saying the ceded lands are even excluded, but they can be included. I'll go with reservations, being that we still haven't restored and made right after 100 years plus with the
Okay,
Hawaiian
thank
community.
you very much. Members, any other questions or comments?
Chair. I'll speak
Representative
going
Kilby.
with reservations just for now, although I appreciate the previous committee's work on improving the bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2251 ST2 HT1 with amendments noted the previously excused member and the reservations of Representatives Ward and McKelvey. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no?
No vote.
Okay, no vote for Representative Kobayashi. Any other members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 3324, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 1, relate to infrastructure. Huh? Senate Draft 2, House Draft 1, relate to infrastructure maintenance and housing subdivisions. Chair, the report has no number of representatives in section 2B4 and 5, and they are not specified. So Chair has arbitrarily decided to recommend up to 3 members of the affected communities to be placed on the board in addition to other representatives. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 3324 ST2 HT1 with amendments noted the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. SB 2583 SD2 relate to public lands. Chair's recommendation to pass it out as is. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair as is.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2583 SD2 as is, noting the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Reservations by Representative Ward. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. We are adjourned.